I mean, we have about 40 minutes of questioning because when we end at 1:30, so now it's 12:50 around. So we have 40 minutes of questioning, and I already received the first question from Mr. Deepak Rajput from Paris. And he wants to know from Arif Muhammad Khan Saab that he wants to read a Holy Quran that is easy to understand. Can you please suggest any specific writer or version in English or Hindi? Mr. Rajput, that's Mr. Rajput's question.
Well, I would say the new edition of Abdullah Yusuf Ali, which does not use classic English, and it may be available in Paris. India, it is very rarely available. It's an American edition, but originally Abdullah Yusuf Ali had used classic English, but later somebody has improved it, not the translation, they have not done anything with the translation, but they have improved in the sense that they have used the modern. And then if he wants to read in Hindi, then I would suggest Wahiduddin Khan.
Okay.
Wahiduddin.
Okay. That is Maulana Wahiduddin Khan, who is also from Delhi.
Hindi, for Hindi I'm saying.
Yeah, true. Fine. For Hindi ke liye. And there's another question that has come up, Arif Sahab. The question is, what are the objectives of Sharia in the light of the Quran?
The objectives of the Sharia.
The maqasid of Sharia. That's what the question.
You know, this whole debate about the Sharia, this has become very confusing because this is based that the law is Sharia. I think you study Quran, you find out what Quran upholds. Quran, you know, the Muslim law, for instance. Here, if you allow me, I will tell you the kind of I do not know what word to use. I will give you two, three in reports from the books of Ahadith. Abu Dawud says, and this is the Hadith number 1321. La takuna qiblatan fi baladin wahid. There should not be two qiblas, two orientations, two religions in one country. Then the Quran, which has been published under the title of Noble Quran, translated by Muhammad Mohsin Khan and Taqi Hilali from Saudi Arabia. I was surprised to read that on page 95, commenting on verse 3.149, Ali Imran 149, the learned authors, translators, they have commented about this particular verse. What is said about residence in the land of Ashirk, which is polytheism. Narrated Samurai bin Jundub, Allah's messenger said, anybody from among Muslims who meets, gathers together, lives and stays permanently with a mushrik, one who does not believe in the oneness of God and agrees to his ways, etc., etc. But then their conclusion is important. This hadith indicates that a Muslim should not stay in a non-Muslim country. He must emigrate to a Muslim country where Islam is practiced. Then one more. Here, this hadith has been, I'm quoting from Hidayah, page 23, wherein it has been said, these words have been put into the mouth of the Holy Prophet. Umirtu an uqatilan nasa hatta yaqulu la ilaha illallah. I have been ordered to fight till people say they recite the kalma. Now, can you Can you, when you place these, as Huzur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself has said, when you place these hadiths before the Quran, now try to look what Quran says. Quran says, La ikraha fi deen, qad tabayyana ar-rushdu min al-ghayy. In matters of religion, there can be no compulsion. The right has been distinguished from left. Quran says, Lakum dinukum waliyadeen, your religion for you and my religion for me. Quran says, in 548, Quran says, Likulli ja'alna minkum shir'atan wa minhaja. For each one is a law, is a way, an open way. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهَ لَجَعَلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَلَكِنْ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِي آتَاكُمْ. If we had willed so, he would have made you all one community. But we have not done so. Why we have not done so? وَلَكِنْ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِي مَا آتَاكُمْ. So that we can test you in that which we have given you. إِلَى اللَّهِ مَرْجِعُكُمْ جَمِيعًا فَيُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ فِيهِ تَخْتَلِفُونَ. Then you have to return to us. Quran has repeatedly used the term ajalim musammi, an appointed term. For this appointed term, you are free. This is the period of test and trial. It is only in the hereafter that you will have the day of judgment. If people here only, if I am doing something wrong not in the sense that I am hurting some fellow human being. If I hurt some fellow human being, then there should be authority to punish me. But if I am as far as the rights of God are concerned, the rights of God, the trial, the judgment shall be in the hereafter. Quran is absolutely clear on that. And then one more I would like to, I find very powerful. In Surah Yunus, Quran says, وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَآمَنَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ كُلُّهُمْ جَمِيعًا أَفَأَنْتَ تُكْرِهُ النَّاسَ حَتَّى يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. I am saying this very important, I consider, because this verse is not addressed to you and me.
Your voice is not being heard.
This verse is, I'll say this verse, I will repeat it again. There is a verse in the Quran which I consider very important. Are you hearing now?
Yeah.
Are you hearing?
Yeah, I can hear now. Yeah, we can hear you.
You can hear. There is a verse which I consider very important, and I consider it important because it is not addressed to you and me. It is addressed to Holy Prophet himself. And the verse says, وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَآمَنَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ كُلُّهُمْ جَمِيعًا أَفَأَنْتَ تُكْرِهُ النَّاسَ حَتَّى يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. And the next verse says, وَمَا كَانَ لِنَفْسٍ أَن تُؤْمِنَ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَيَجْعَلُ الرِّجْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. Meaning, if it had been God's will, all human beings, they would all have believed, all who are on earth. Will you then, we have not willed so, will you then compel mankind against their will to believe? Then further it says, no soul, وَمَا كَانَ لِنَفْسٍ أَن تُؤْمِنَ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. No soul can believe except by the will of Allah, and He will place doubt and obscurity on those who will not understand. And then, it has been, message has been given, but you accept it or you do not accept it. It has been left to the individual. Quran says, Inna hadaynahu sabil, imma shakiran wa imma kafura. The path has been shown to you. Now it is for you either be grateful, accept it, or be ungrateful, reject it. Now the question is, if God does not want to force anybody, how human beings can arrogate this authority to themselves on behalf of God, that we will bring to people to a position which we consider is right. Quran upholds freedom. Quran upholds human dignity. Quran upholds equality. Whereas the laws are full of indignities, full of provisions which give you authority to compel others, to subject others to all kind of indignities. So there is a great difference between the two,
Absolutely.
and everything is summed up in just one term, and that is taqwa. If you are a muttaqi, then you cannot step on the feet of the other person. Then
Absolutely.
you will see yourself in the other person. Then you will see. Hazrat Ali, in fact, that I find is the best definition. Hazrat Ali was asked by somebody to define religion for him. What is deen? Hazrat Ali, he was prepared to go somewhere. He did not stop even for a minute. And while riding his horse, he said, it's very simple. Al-azmatu li amrillahi wa shafqatu li khalqillah. You accept God as the greatest and you start loving the creation of God. That is the whole religion. And I
Absolutely.
personally feel that Hazrat Ali understood his values were informed by the teachings of Quran. So
Absolutely.
he understood it. And I accept that that is, if you want to say in 4 words, then that is the message of the Quran. Al-azmatu li amrillahi wa shafqatu li khalqillahi. To believe in the greatness of God and to love the creation of God. That is what religion is.
Thank you. Wonderful. Excellent definition, Arif Sahib. Now we have a very interesting question from Dr. Shariq Nisar. You may know him. He's an authority on Islamic finance in India, one of our good friends. And he has a very interesting question. He said there's a famous hadith related to Hazrat Muaz ibn Jabal when he was
Yes.
being sent to Yemen as a governor. Prophet asked
Yes.
him how he's going to make judgment among people. Muaz said, according to the Quran. Prophet asked him what he does after that. He said, according to Sunnah. And then if he does not find anything in the Sunnah, the Muaz said, I will exert myself. Mani ijtihad, the word fashtahidu came from the ijtihad, comes from there. The Prophet is very pleased. This hadith is quoted extensively in support of sources of Sharia, such as ijtihad, ijma, and qiyas. That is, they say this hadith is the basis for the fiqh and everything that is being given to us in the name of the Sharia. What is your opinion on this hadith and its interpretation?
No, I find this great hadith.
Yeah.
I find great hadith, but here the important thing is we should try to understand that the important thing is that he is asking how I take my decisions. He is not saying,
Yeah.
he's asking Huzur Sallam how I take my decision. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you are audible. जी
I'm
आपकी
audible.
आवाज आ रही है.
Okay, okay. How he is saying that how I take my decision. Now, he is not laying down the law. He's asking how I take my decisions. So a muttaqi person will try to take the decisions in accordance with the provisions of the book. Now, the second question, if you do not find anything there, now some of our friends insist that everything is there. But Hazrat Muaz is saying, if I do not find something there, then he says, according to what you have heard me saying or seen me doing. Then even if I'm faced with a situation where I'm not able to find anything from there, then use your reason and intelligence. Because Quran is full of exhortation and Quran wants us to apply our reason. In fact, the last verse which I quoted from Surah Yunus, the last part of the verse is وَيَجْعَلُ الرِّجْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ, and God throws dust or obscurity on those who do not use their reason, their intelligence. So this is a great hadith, and this should, but this is about humans taking their own decision. Even when I take the decision, my decision is not free from some error. Therefore, I cannot claim that the decision which I have taken is the decision of God. That should be clear in our mind.
आरिफ सर, ये सवाल जो है नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने पिक किया था हजरत मुआज से। तो नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने कहा कि कैसे फैसला करेंगे, तो उन्होंने कहा कि कुरान से। तो नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने कहा कि अगर आप कुरान में नहीं मिलेगा तो आप क्या करेंगे, तो हजरत मुआज ने कहा कि सुन्नत से। फिर नबी अगर वहां पे भी आपको नहीं मिलेगा तो क्या करेंगे, तो उन्होंने इज्तिहाद करूंगा। एंड देन नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने कहा कि मैसेंजर जो है अपने मैसेंजर से खुश हुआ, उन्होंने सीने को थपथपाया और उन्होंने कहा कि मैसेंजर इज हैप्पी विथ हिज मैसेंजर। सो दैट इज कंसीडर्ड सोर्स ऑफ शरिया। Sorry.
No, absolutely right. Here Hazrat Muaz bin Jabal is asking Huzur Sallam that you are sending me as an administrator to this particular place. What is your guideline? How I should take my decisions? Then he said, "Bi kitabillah." Question was, "Kaifa taqdi?" The reply was, "Bi kitabillah." فَإِنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. If I do not find it in the book of God, here I would like to pause for a second and say that there are people who say that nothing is missing from the book. But here Hazrat Muaz is saying, if I do not find it there, then he says, bi sunnati Rasulullah. Then he says, فَإِنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ فِي سُنَّةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. If I do not find it even there, then Huzur Sallam says, Ashtahid Raya Wala Alu. And then he says, Alhamdulillahi alladhi waffaqa Rasula Rasulillah. He thanked God who has made. Question hai from Hazrat Muaz. Replies are by Huzur Sallam. जी
सवाल जो है जो मुझ तक पहुंचा है, और मेरे इल्म में इजाफा होगा अगर आप ये बताएं। मुझे जहां तक पहुंचा है कि हुजूर ने पूछा कि हम तुम्हें वहां भेज रहे हैं और तुम वहां कैसे फैसला करोगे। तो हुजूर के सवाल के जवाब में हजरत मुआज ने कहा है, न कि हजरत मुआज ने सवाल पूछा है।
नहीं,
हुजूर के सवाल के जवाब में हजरत मुआज ने कहा है, और इसी वजह से हुजूर सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम कहते हैं कि मैं अल्लाह का रसूल अपने रसूल से खुश हुआ।
सही है। I think you are not. I think you are definitely right, because Huzur Sallam is asking, "Kaifa taqdi?" How will you decide? He says, "Bi kitabillah."
हुजूर सल्लल्लाहु का सवाल है जी, और जवाब हजरत मुआज की तरफ से है।
राइट। उसके बाद हजरत मुआज कहते हैं, "फ़इन लम यकुन फी किताबिल्लाह." If I do not find it in the book of God, that is important. Then he says, "Bi sunnati Rasulullah." Then he says, "Fa'in lam yakun fi sunnati Rasulullah." Then he says, "Ashtahid raya balaulu." Basically, the point is, in fact, the Imam Abu Hanifa, the time in which Imam Abu Hanifa was living, that was the time when Islam had crossed the limits of the Arabian Peninsula and had come in contact with various other nationalities, and new problems had come up, and that is why istihsan is considered very important principle in the jurisprudence of Hazrat Imam Abu Hanifa. But the problem is that Imam Abu Hanifa never insisted. In fact, if you allow me, I can give you his own opinion, which is, there are very few things which have come to us directly from Imam Abu Hanifa. But if you allow me, I can give you his own opinion. No,
1 minute. 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 1 minute
Imam Abu Hanifa said, it is not permitted for anyone to accept our views if they do not know from where we got them. Imam Abu Hanifa he was addressing individual problems, because law making is never considered it never comes under the domain of an individual. Law making in the light of basic principle, even that is done by a committee. Therefore, Imam Abu Hanifa clearly said it is not permitted for anyone to accept our view if they do not know from where we got them. In another narration, he said, it is prohibited for someone who does not know my evidence to give verdicts on the basis of my words. Another narration, Imam Abu Hanifa says, for we are mortals, we say one thing one day and take it back the next day. In another narration, he says, woe to you, O Yaqub, do not write down anything you hear from me, for it happens that I hold one opinion today and reject it tomorrow, or hold one opinion tomorrow and reject it the day after tomorrow. And this is not only Imam Abu Hanifa, even Imam Shafi, Imam Hanbal, Imam Malik, when one Khalifa who was there at the time of Imam Malik, he suggested to him, while both were in Makkah on a pilgrimage, he suggested to him that we will make your book as the law of the dominion. Imam Malik refused and did not give permission, because they know that they do not know under what circumstances, while addressing an individual case, they have given these opinions, whether this will be applicable in other cases or not. They were not sure. Therefore, they never wanted their opinions to acquire the status of law. Law is something which must be addressed by a body of experts, not by any individual. Howsoever, leave aside Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, but other than Prophet and other than God, no individual can, despite being very intelligent and wise, cannot arrogate to himself the work of legislating for the people. Thank you.
It's true. I think Abdul, have you taken the question about the interaction between secular law? No.
No, Professor.
No. Okay. I think that's your question, right?
Right.
How does Sharia interact with secular law? Do we need Islamic State, or is Sharia democratic?
Yeah, those are three questions from my side.
Yeah, there were three questions, Arif Saab. So,
yeah,
from our own member, he wants to know, how does Sharia interact with secular law? Do we need Islamic State, and is Sharia democratic?
Please read it again.
In fact, all are interlinked. The first part is, what is the connection between Sharia and secular law? And number two, do we really need an Islamic State? And number three, is Sharia democratic, or is it undemocratic?
Third is democratic or undemocratic, and second is?
Second is, do we really need an Islamic State?
Islamic State. Okay. First, you are asking me what is the link between Sharia and secular law.
Yes.
Well, if secularism means looking after and promoting your worldly interest, and with that meaning and that concept in your mind, if you study what is claimed to be Sharia, to me that is fiqh, then you will come to the conclusion that that is totally linked to the secular promotion of the secular interest of the particularly of the rulers of that time. In fact, it has nothing to do with the 90% of the provisions, I would say, because I have been devoting a lot of time to these subjects you will find there is discrimination on the basis of the religion of a person, which Quran does not have. There is the subject. In fact, we must understand that those were the times when the concept of nation state was not there. Equality in the sense, I find that very interesting. Even when I say of equality, what kind of equality Quran talks about? There is a verse in Surah Yusuf, which says that when Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam had decided to detain his real brother Binyamin, then Quran says that according to the law of the land, he did not have the authority. Therefore, he resorted to a device.
Yes, hila.
And what was the hila? He got some staff, placed some golden ornaments in the baggage of Binyamin. And to me, what is important are the words where Quran says, because liya khuzafiya khahi, wo apne bahi could not take his brother under the law of the land, which means, and Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam was a prophet. Therefore, it is clear that prophet was not asserting that since I know what is right, since I know what the law of God is, therefore for me it is right to detain him, to stop. No, he was not. He was saying everybody is equal before as far as the law of the land is concerned. That is the concept of equality which comes to my mind from Quran. Whereas if you look at the, say, majority of the people are among Muslims are Hanfi.
I think we have lost your voice, Arif Sahab.
Acha. Now do you hear me? Now do you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we can hear.
Okay.
Yes.
So my point is that if you look at Hidayah, Hidayah is actually a fiqhi exercise, but is paraded out as Sharia.
Yeah.
It is full of indignities for others. It is full of inequality. It is full of provisions which are obnoxious, which permits rulers to use force for anything, any purpose. And I have given you examples that how those who were writing these rules, how they have behaved. So I find that what you are saying Sharia, I am saying fiqh. That is not Sharia. To my mind, that is fiqh. That is all about promotion of secular interest, but secular interest not of everybody, but of the ruling class, because those were the days when kingship was there, empire was there. There is a famous sentence of Amir Muawiyah, which he did during his speech at Masjid-e-Nabawi in Medina. This sentence is part of his speech, where he says, Ana awwalul muluk, I am the first king among the Arabs. So under the kingship, is it possible to promote equality? Unless you are king of England, where you are forced to give up every power. Kings do not give up their powers. So, and laws under the kings will be discriminatory. Laws under the kings will be full of indignities. They will not be equitable laws. So there is none. Now, second question is Islamic State. I have already told you that even those who are in favor of the Islamic State if you have a state, then you have the laws. Even they, after much brainstorming, they could find only two words in the prophetic narrations. That too not in Quran, in the prophetic narrations. As-Sultan and Al-Jama'at. They said these are the words which have been used for these days. Now go to the Quran and see what is the meaning of the Sultan. And will Huzur Sallallahu use the word Sultan in any other meaning? No. Sultan is authority. Sultan is not a state. So the concept of the state was not there. We have every freedom to form a state, but we cannot claim that this is sanctioned by Quran. Yes, as a to fulfill our requirements, we have every right to do that. But claiming, there is another verse of the Quran which says that فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ, and woe to those who write book with their own hands. And then after that, after writing the book, they claim this is from God. لِيَشْتَرُوا بِهِ سَمَنًا قَلِيلًا, so that they can buy some worldly gains through it. It is, Quran had visualized this situation. In Quran, there is no concept of the Islamic state. Quran, the concept is of taqwa. Quran wants to transform the soul, mind, heart, and it wants to bring internal revolution. Wherever you may be, under any circumstances you may be, you will not be, if you develop Quranic attitude, you will never complain against anybody. You will, because Quran repeatedly tells you that every good that comes to you is from God, and every evil that comes to you has been earned by your own hands. Quran, the whole emphasis is on taqwa. It is not on state. Then you have said, third question is Sharia.
Is it democratic?
How Sharia, if you are asked, if you are using the term in context of the Quran, then I will say that it is much more than democratic, because democracy, all human rights, they flow from the concept of dignity of mankind. And Quran declares in no uncertain terms, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ.
Yeah.
Everything flows from the concept of dignity of Adam. On the other hand, the fiqh, which is, sorry, I'm using this term again and again, which is paraded out as Sharia, which is not Sharia, that is full of inequalities, indignities. It allows use of compulsion. It is very oppressive for women. It is very oppressive for non-Muslims. That is certainly you can't call it democratic. But if you come to Quran, then many a times people refer to some verses of the Quran, like the verse of the sword, or some other verses where Quran allows this. We have to look at everything in a context. There is in chapter 60, read first 10 verses of chapter 60. It clearly lays down. It shows who are the people against whom Quran allows use of force. They are the people who deny freedom of religion to others by persecuting them. Quran clearly says, Quran does not stop you from dealing kindly with those who have not driven you out of your homes, who have not oppressed you. What Quran forbids is dealing with those who persecute others. So basically, even term fitna clearly is an Arabic term for persecution. But in Shariat, it is persecution. In fiqh, it has been termed as disbelief. Anyone who disbelieves in Islam, he comes under the category of fitna. No, Quran does not say that. Quran says fitna is persecution, those who deny freedom of religion to others, and because of their religion who persecute others. Their activities, they are fitna. So something which is discriminatory certainly cannot be democratic. But something which upholds right to religion, right to freedom, right to have your amruhum shura bainahum. Even your decisions must be accorded through process of consultation. But all this, I say I won't go into other verses. For me, one verse is enough. And that one verse is Walaqad karramna bani Adama. Even Human Rights Charter says that the fountain spring of all human rights is inherent dignity of mankind. So there is a difference between Sharia and fiqh. Fiqh is discriminatory. Shariat is absolutely upholds dignity of mankind.
Yes. Excellent, Arif sir. Actually, we have 5 more minutes because the time given to us by the governor's office was till 1:30. We have 5 more minutes. But even after the governor Saab leaves, we can continue with the discussion. I mean, our meeting can go on. In the meantime, yes, Arif sir.
If you think there is some other important question, I can stay for another 10 minutes.
Oh, sure, then that would be wonderful. I thought your time was fixed, so if you can stay on, nothing like that. Then we will go ahead. Yeah, sure. Then we will end by, I mean, you can be there till 1:45. Then after you leave, we will continue with the discussion for some more time if people want to stay on. So now, actually, I would like to, Majid Parikh Saab has sent me a question, but since he is another good scholar of Islam, and you mentioned his father favorably when you began your speech, so I thought I would rather request him to ask his question himself. So Majid bhai, please feel free to ask your question.
जी इज्जतमाब सलाम पेश करता हूँ। अस्सलाम वालेकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। जी मुझे एक बात अर्ज करनी थी कि ये दारुल हरब और दारुल अमन ये क्या चीजें हैं, क्या कुरान इनको एंडोर्स करता है? और दूसरा ये गज़वा हिंद क्या है? ये मेरा कुछ सवाल था, क्योंकि अभी गैर मुस्लिमों में इन चीजों पे बड़ी चर्चाएं होती हैं।
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, और मुझे यकीन है कि माजिद साहब इसका जवाब जानते हैं, वो मुझसे बुलवाना चाहते हैं। वो खुद बड़े स्कॉलर हैं और मैं
बखुदा ऐसा नहीं सर,
मैं कायल हूँ उनकी का, इसलिए। लेकिन वो ठीक है, अच्छा है जो आप कह रहे हैं। देखिए, ये तो सभी ने, I think everybody has made it, all the writers have made it clear that there is nothing like Darul Harab and Darul Aman. In fact, if we go by Quran and Hadith, then it has been said, Huzur Sallallahu himself has said, the whole earth has been made a mosque for me. If for Huzur Sallallahu the whole earth is mosque, how for the later Muslims the earth has been divided into the Darul Harab, the house of war, and Darul Aman, the house of peace? How is that possible? Actually, it is these distortions I was referring to. These distortions go totally against the letter and the spirit of Quran. And that is the reason it are these terms that promoted the mindset which asked for the partition of India. Now, two-nation theory. Two-nation theory actually was rooted in this Darul Harab and Darul Aman. Why? Because India, Jinnah was an educated man. Muslim League leaders, they were not ignorant people. They knew very well that India has many religions, not just Hindus and Muslims. Christians are there, Jains are there, Sikhs are there, Buddhists are there, and many other religions. If nationality is to be determined by the faith of a person, how come India had two nations? Then India must have, then they should have pleaded that India has 7, 8, 9, 10 nations and should be divided accordingly. No, they said two, they recognize Buddhists are there, Jains are there, Sikhs are there, many other religions are there, but two nations. Why? Because the later day ulama fabricated a hadith which said, Al-Kufr millatun wahida. Every non-Muslim is a kafir, and all kafirs, they constitute one nation. And that was the reason why this two-nation theory came into existence. So Darul Harab and Darul Aman, this is the language, the jurisprudential language of the time of the Muslim Empire. It has absolutely nothing to do with Quran or Hadith. In fact, it goes against the letter and the spirit and the teachings of the Quran and Hadith. Now, the second is, you have said Ghazwa Hind. As far as I know, because unfortunately, most of the books, for a long period of time, they were called Maghazi, Sirat books. It is only last about 250, 300 years, that the name was changed to Sirah. Earlier, and Maghazi meant battle accounts. Now, if you look at the definition there itself, Ghazwa is a armed encounter in which Prophet Sallallahu himself personally participated. Those encounters came to be known as Ghazwa. This is not my invention. Maulana Shibli Nomani in Siratul Nabi, so many others, they have clearly defined it. Ghazwa means a military encounter in which Prophet Sallallahu himself participated personally. And Saraya were those where Prophet himself was not present. So now, after more than 1400 years of the death of the Prophet, you are talking of Ghazwa-e-Hind. So what are you suggesting? These are all, this is not the only one. We should never forget that Imam Bukhari had a collection of about 10,000 ahadith. And why we give him so much credit? We give him credit because out of these 600,000 here, Imam Muslim had 100,000 hadiths. Imam Bukhari, out of these 6,000 hadiths, he found only about 3,000 reliable to be included. Not 6,000, 600,000. He found only about 3,700 to be reliable enough to be included in his collection. Now, the ahadith, which he was of the opinion that they are not authentic, they are apocryphal. Now look at the percentage. Out of a collection of 600,000, only about 4,000, 3,700, we take the number to 4,000. Only 4,000 were selected. The total number of ahadith in Bukhari is about 7,000, and we exclude the repetition, then it comes to about 3,700. In Muslim...
Actually 2,700 actually.
Okay, I do not remember the exact number because long time I have not seen those papers again. And Imam Muslim had a collection of more than 10 lakh ahadith, out of which he included about 4,000. So look at this is not something which should surprise us. Why it should not surprise us? Because Huzur Sallallahu himself said, Huzur has said, Taksaru lakumul ahadith abadi. You will see abundance of ahadith after me. Fama ruvvi lakum ahadithun anni. Whenever you hear anything from me, fa'ariduhu ala kitabillah. Place it before the Quran. Fama wafaqahu faqbuluhu. If it accords with Quran, accept it. Wama khalafahu faradduhu. If it contravenes the provision of the Quran, then reject it. This is ridiculous. The way this Ghazwa-e-Hind is talked about. The very name of the hadith. You know, just stay there. Ghazwa is an armed encounter where Prophet himself has participated. Now, which Ghazwa-e-Hind you are talking about? More than 1400 years after his death. So it is absolutely ridiculous. These things should not be given. They must be deserved with the contempt which they deserve. So I find nothing in that Ghazwa-e-Hind. That Ghazwa-e-Hind is totally fabricated story, and absolutely. They have, while fabricating the story, they have not even taken care to use proper words. Why? Because Ghazwa is clearly defined as an encounter in which Holy Prophet himself has participated.
Absolutely. Is there any other person who would like to ask any question? Please raise your hands, and we can give that person the chance to ask. or they can simply ask the question if you want to go ahead. Wajida, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, I'll read out the question posted by Wajida Rahman.
Yeah, Wajida, you can ask yourself.
It is just comments, not question. I think.
It's a comment, is it? Okay,
yeah.
if it's comment, okay, if it's comment, we can leave it. We can go to the question. If anybody has a question, maybe we can. So, are there no more questions to Arif Sahib?
No, Faisal. I have one question.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question
Yes, please go ahead.
to Dr. Arif Sahib. I mean, this is Tariq Fayaz. Tariq Fayaz.
Tariq Fayaz, please go ahead. Yeah.
How do you see the rise of Salafism in India in the recent years, and what are the challenges that India as a secular state can have from these Salafist movements? And we see them implicated in so many terrorist activities. They come out. So what are the challenges India as a secular state can have from these Salafists? Thank you.
Salafism was previously known. There are different terms which are used to describe them: Ahle Hadith, Wahhabi. So this is not something new which has emerged in India. The people who subscribe to the school of jurisprudence of the Ahle Hadith has been there most of the time. In fact, Maulana Azad himself, although he came from a family of the family which was the family of Sufi, but he personally, and he has written about it, that he was more influenced by Ahle Hadith. But then at the same time, if you read his writings, then Salafis denounce and decry music. Maulana Azad could not live without music. So, as far as India is concerned, much before India became free, much before India adopted this constitution, India has always been a land right from the beginning of its civilizational journey. India has believed in acceptance of diversity, respecting diversity, accepting diversity. So in India, all let 1,000 flowers bloom. That kind of attitude has always been in India. It is not only that this freedom of conscience, freedom of religion is guaranteed by the constitution, but this has worked because this is deeply rooted in Indian psyche. We accept everything. We celebrate. We celebrate diversity. This country geographically, culturally, lingually, faith-wise, is full of diversity. So Salafism as such does not make us uncomfortable. What is important is that you are free to believe whatever you want to believe. You can believe. You have every right to believe that your faith is the superior faith, is the only right faith. You have every right. But you have no right, I have no right to impose my belief on others. The problem does not come from belief, even though it is exclusive. That is not the cause of problem. That is not the cause of concern. Problem arises when you try to impose, you try to do things which mean that you are trying to impose your belief onto others, or because you feel you are right, therefore you are trying to denigrate others. You are trying to make fun of others. That is what creates problems. So I only hope and pray that whatever they want to believe, they have every right to believe, but they do not do anything which is offensive to others. Or we have seen and everywhere it has been ascribed to them only, the rise of terrorism. And we are engaged in this fight against terrorism since last more than almost 40 years. So these are problematic things, but each individual cannot be condemned because to be responsible for the terrorism because he subscribes to that school. Only those who indulge in violent activities are to be taken care of. So as far as the school of jurisprudence, the kind of faith is concerned, I have no problem with them. But we all, not only they, all of us must be careful that we have every freedom to believe in anything. You can even believe that I am the best in the world. But keep that faith to yourself and don't try to insult others by saying, I'm superior and you are lower. You are superior, okay, fine, you are superior. But don't say to others that you are inferior. That is where the problem is.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir.
We have about time for just one more question because we had fixed till 1:45. So it's 1:40 now. So perhaps we can take another question from our viewers.
Faiz bhai, agar if I can be allowed one more question.
Yeah, yes, Sharif bhai. Please go ahead.
आरिफ साहब, दो लोगों का आपने बहुत अच्छा जिक्र किया, इमाम अबू हनीफा का और इमाम यूसुफ का। एक ज़ाती ख्वाहिश मेरे दिल में आई आपसे पूछूं कि आप दोनों में से किससे ज्यादा इंस्पायर्ड हैं?
दोनों में से किसको?
आप खुद।
देखिए, हमारे लिए तो हुकूमत, मतलब मैंने आपको शुरू में ही एक हदीस कही और वो हदीस थी कि अल कलिमतुल हिकमतु ज़ाल्लतिल मौमिन फहीसु वजदहा फहुवा आपको बिहा। अच्छी चीज कहीं से भी मिले उसे लीजिए। और डॉक्टर राधा कृष्णन ने इसी बात को बहुत खूबसूरती से कहा है। उन्होंने कहा है कि आई एम नॉट इंटरेस्टेड इन द एंसेस्ट्री ऑफ आइडियाज, आई एम इंटरेस्टेड इन द एफिनिटी ऑफ थॉट। तो मैंने तो आपको बताया, मैं तो इमाम अबू हनीफा को मानता हूँ कि वो अपने दौर में निहायत मुत्तकी, परहेजगार, इल्म दोस्त ऐसे कि जो सही जो इस्लामी तसव्वुर है, जहां वो इल्म देने पर तनख्वाह नहीं लेते थे, उल्टे कमजोर और गरीब तालिबे इल्मों को अपने पैसे से मदद करते थे, उनकी और उनके खानदानों की। तो अगर ये शख्सियत, इमाम अबू यूसुफ तो जरा मुख्तलिफ शख्सियत है, वो तो सरकारी आलिम थे, लेकिन इमाम अबू हनीफा की बात ही कुछ और है। और इमाम अबू हनीफा क्यों, मैं तो कहता हूं कि किसी भी ट्रेडिशन में हो लोग, किसी भी ट्रेडिशन के लोग हों, जो अच्छी बात कहीं से भी मिलती है हमें उसको लेना चाहिए, और इसलिए कि वो चीज हमारी मददगार होती है अपनी जिंदगी को बेहतर बनाने के लिए। Thank you.
Beautiful. So I think we have reached, it's 42 now. We have 3 more minutes. Anyone else would like to ask? Yes, Majid bhai.
सर, मैं पूछना चाह रहा था चैप्टर 5 में 5वीं आयत पर, इसमें
पढ़ दीजिए।
सूरतुल माइदा की आयत है, वतामुकुम हिल्लुल लहुम वल मुहसनातु मिनल मुमिनात वल मुहसनातु मिनल लज़ीना ऊतुल किताब मिन क़ब्लिकुम इज़ा आतैतुमुहुन्ना उजूरहुन्ना मुहसिनीन गैर मुसाफ़िहीन वला मुत्तखिज़ी अख़दान। ये आयत जो है अहले किताब विमेन से मैरिज हमको अलाउ करती है
जी।
तो अब इसमें मेरा ये सवाल था कि हम अहले किताब विमेन को ले सकते हैं हमारे हिसारे निकाह में, उनके हिसारे निकाह में हम हमारी विमेन को दे सकते हैं क्या, हमारी डॉटर्स को?
देखिए, हमारा जो फिक़्ह है वो तो उसकी इजाजत नहीं देता, वो तो इजाजत नहीं देता है। लेकिन ये मुमकिन नहीं है, कुरान में कोई उसका जिक्र भी नहीं है, तो ये मुमकिन कैसे है कि आप किसी एक कम्युनिटी की खातून आपके घर आएगी, आपके बच्चे उससे पैदा होंगे, उनके साथ मजीद रिश्तेदारियां नहीं होंगी, ये कैसे पॉसिबल? फिर मैं आपको मैं इस बहस में जाने की बजाय मैं आपको एक तारीखी मिसाल देना चाहूंगा। जब मंगोलों ने बगदाद का, जिसे सुकूत कहते हैं, तो और ये कहा जाता है कि साहब इश्तिहाद के दरवाजे उसके बाद बंद हुए, मैं ये नहीं मानता हूँ। मैं मानता हूँ कि 1140 में अशरी तहरीक के बाद इश्तिहाद के दरवाजे बंद हो गए थे, इसीलिए बगदाद का सुकूत हुआ। आफ्टर तकलीद का मतलब होता है कि हम अपनी अक्ल का इस्तेमाल नहीं करेंगे। तो जब आपने अक्ल के इस्तेमाल पर पाबंदी लगा ली तो इन्वेजन तो होना ही था, जो 100 साल के बाद हुआ, 1250 में हुआ। तो मैं उसे वो नहीं मानता हूँ। मैं मानता हूँ इज्तिहाद पर दरवाजे, इज्तिहाद इज नथिंग बट एप्लीकेशन ऑफ यूजिंग योर इंटेलिजेंस। जहाँ कुरान कहता है कि हमने तुम्हें ये फैकल्टीज दी, सुनने की, देखने की, चखने की, लेकिन तुम कम शुक्र अदा करते हो। क्या मतलब है? That you do not use these faculties which have been given to you to acquire knowledge, to acquire wisdom. So when we put a ceiling on using these faculties, we become attackable. We say, matlab, not just Muslims, anybody, an individual or a group. Once you decide that you are going to restrict yourself strictly to what your ancestors have done, then you become vulnerable. तो मैं तो वो नहीं मानता हूँ, मगर मैं आई एम गिविंग यू दैट एग्जाम्पल फॉर द रीजन दैट आफ्टर द invasion of Baghdad, that was the law of the times, that the conquered people, they used to become slaves. But an unwritten rule was there that men were mostly killed, old women were also killed, but young women were allowed to live. But the women of the royal household were not given to ordinary people. They were given to the royal princes. This has happened during the Islamic victories, Muslim victories also. I'm sorry, I used the word Islamic. Islam has not come for these kind of victories, but Muslims have done this. So one senior Abbasi princess was given to the eldest son of Halaku. I shall not go into details, but therein lies the story of Mongols becoming Muslims and ruling India as Mughals for more than 250 years. And it is this story which generally Muslim scholars try not to speak about. This is a historical account. The credit goes all to that senior Abbasi princess who was given as a slave to the son of Halaku, the senior son of Halaku, but who, because she must have been very intelligent, she might have been very beautiful, she might have been very shrewd, she controlled him totally. And the historical accounts say that this man told her that the Mongols had no religion, they were animist. So the history books tell us, and there are only very few accounts about it. They tell us that this prince told her that I won't announce about my faith right now, because if I do so, I might be disinherited. But after he assumed the reins of the government, then rest is history. You know about it. But this now, Quran, you know, I would like to quote one hadith. Huzur Sallallahu ने फरमाया, इन्नकुम फी ज़मानिन मन तरका मिनकुम बिउश्री मा उमीरा बिही हलक. You are living in times when if you leave 1/10 of what has been prescribed, you shall be destroyed. Summa yati zamani. Man amila minhum bi ushri ma umira bihi naja. Then a time will come when if you follow even 10% of that which has been prescribed today will be saved. So, and there is a Quranic verse also. Illa tanfiru yu'azzibkum azaban alima. If you shall not move forward, if you shall not go ahead, if you will not march forth, then you will land in a very tormenting punishment. So we have been given all these faculties to acquire knowledge, wisdom. Shariat is to guide us. Shariat is not law. Law human beings make because laws are subject to social context. Law changes with times. So now, I have given you a historical example as far as classic fiqh is concerned, that does not allow a Muslim woman to marry even a Kitabi man. But I have given you this example only to show that we should not try to underestimate the capability of women to rise to the occasion and do what becomes later very appreciable and admirable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arif Sahib. And that was an absolutely...
Faisa. I thought, just came to my mind. You know, on this episode, because this is not mentioned at many places, either in Muslim history or Muslim book, but there is a share of Allama Iqbal.
Ji, please.
है आया शोरिशे तातार के अफसाने से पासबा मिल गए काबे को सनम खाने
से.
This share refers to that episode where everything happened because of this Abbasi princess.
Absolutely. And you know, what a wealth of knowledge you have shared today, Arif Sahib. That is because you have gone deep into the subject and studied it. And I know, as we expected, this meeting went off so well. And I'm sure we are all enriched a lot more. What we were before the start of this meeting. In fact, very interesting. You just quoted a share, and I myself am reminded of a very interesting couplet from a friend of mine, who's no more. But he said this couplet, and I'm not exaggerating, but I'm sure it should apply to you in some sense. You can say this in a sense, you know. The couplet goes like this: Sathe paimai mein the sab mahiye harfo khayal. Sathe paimai mein the sab mahiye harfo khayal. Main bas ek tanha shanawar tha ke zere aap tha. So all those intellectual scholars were busy just measuring the surface. I was the lone diver who was below the water, trying to search for pearls from within the Quran in this context. So therefore, you know, it's been a wonderful time spent with you today, Arif Sahib, and I have no words to thank you. And you know, in fact, you spent more than what you allocated for us today. It was till 1:30, and we are almost at 1:50. You have spent more time than given to us. So I'm sure all our participants, must really be happy with this, the talk of yours and the questions that you have answered after that. So inshallah, but now I think we would certainly let you go. But I would like to tell our participants, if anybody wishes to continue, our WebEx meeting will go on for another half an hour. We have time. We had actually kept a longer time just in case.
So I'm permitted to go, Faisal?
Yes, Arif Sahib, we permit you to leave, and we will continue after you leave. Thank you so much, Arif Sahib. Jai Hind. Jai Hind.